Hey everybody, welcome back to Cool's Book Reviews. Since today is November 22nd, I thought we would check out something related to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Now, something that gets brought up a lot when you're researching JFK, and especially this day, is of course the Warren Report. Now, this was the official government investigation, and so yeah, I dove into it, took some notes. I'll give you my thoughts. This isn't going to be a conspiracy episode, and this is definitely going to be more just about the report itself. I'm not saying there couldn't be anything fishy with it. I'm just saying today, in this episode, we're focused solely on the Warren Report. So the investigation itself, I guess, really kind of started on 11/22/63. Obviously, the day JFK was assassinated. You know, they were out looking for the suspect. Obviously, Tippit was killed as well, Officer Tippit in Dallas. And then Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested at the Texas Theater. He does put up a fight. And then in a strange turn of events, Oswald himself is assassinated on live television by Jack Ruby. So, in the foreword, it does talk about, yes, it was kind of started 11/22/63. 2,300 reports were submitted by September 11th, 1964. So nearly a year later. So let's take a look at this report itself, and then we will get into a little bit of the notes and kind of my thoughts on this. So as you can see up top, you got the logo, you got some nice little design there, and then it does say the Warren Report, the official report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now on the side we do see the Warren Report again, and then the Associated Press. And the back just continues that black coloration with that similar design that runs over to the front. So I know, depending on, I guess, where you get this from, it can be a lot longer. This version itself is 366 pages with the appendixes. We'll flip through, and it does show that there is usually 2 lines per page. So while you're reading one page, you're really kind of reading 2 pages at a time, and so it might take you a little bit longer. There is pictures, and we'll kind of go through them now. So this one does show the Warren Commission itself. You can see Gerald R. Ford, Hal Boggs, Richard B. Russell, Chief Justice Earl Warren, Senator John Sherman Cooper, John J. McCloy, Alan Dulles, J. Lee Rankin, and of course Dulles is kind of the odd man for the investigation for a lot of people because he was, fired by JFK. Here you can actually see the moment that Oswald was gunned down by Ruby on live TV. And there's the moment that Lyndon Johnson was sworn in. And it does show, this one's an old copy, so it's falling apart, gotta be careful. One of the last pictures of JFK, and then obviously after, there's Oswald after he was captured. There's a picture of Kennedy. I'm trying to be careful. It's an old copy, so it's seen its fair share of reading, that is for sure. So in the back we do got some exhibits. You can see here, shows you, here's a school book depository building. And here they are, reenacting how the rifle, I guess, would have been set up. So these are all just the different exhibits. There's quite a bit of stuff in here, and I'll save a lot of it. If you guys want to check it out, you guys definitely can. I won't go through them all, but let's get into some of the notes I talked about. So yeah, while reading this, much like any book, I took notes. Some of it, nothing to pertain to the actual report, just things I'd read, and it connected dots somewhere else. One of which was the driver was William R. Greer, which obviously brought to mind Stephen Greer, somebody that's come up a lot on the channel. I definitely do not think there's any family relation, but it's just the name that kind of made something pop into my head. So page 5, at least in this version, it does look like there is a actual typo. It says Tau older children, but I do believe it's supposed to say 2 older children. So definitely thought that was something interesting. And then obviously there is kind of like the stuff we all know. There's police hidden in public clothing around the motorcade route. And then it talks about how the bubble top that a lot of people do make a deal about wasn't on, but even if it had been on, it wasn't bulletproof or even bullet resistant for a lot of reasons, but obviously for weight and convenience to take it off. Early on, it does actually mention how the underpass wasn't where shots were fired. There was no shots from the underpass directly, so it definitely brings to mind that there's a lot of witnesses that were saying that perhaps some of the shots were at least fired from that direction. It did describe JFK State when he arrived at Parkland, small breaths, but no real rhythm between, slight heartbeat, the eyes were wide open. Doctors thought JFK was alive, and they definitely seemed to be doing what they could, but obviously with that large wound on his head, it doesn't seem like there's a lot they could have done at that time. Now, had he only been shot through the neck, that first shot, there's probably a good chance that he survives. I do see a lot of people kind of mentioning how the grassy knoll isn't mentioned. I don't believe that really was a term yet. I think that was a little bit later thing that came up. But at least in here, it does mention the railroad yards, which is behind the grassy knoll. There's actually, if you walk up there, just because we've been there, go behind the fence, you can see the railroad tower and everything. So it does show, again, at the same time, witnesses were still at least probably telling the investigation that they think shots were fired from behind the grassy knoll. And then, of course, it does come to that bullet that is found at Parkland on the stretcher, and how it's kind of misconstrued as early on as it came from JFK's stretcher, but the investigation shows I guess it came from Connolly's stretcher based on the timeline and how the JFK stretcher was handled. This is where you come into the state of the bullet, how pristine it was. It does show a little bit damage at the front, but nothing real major, considering I do believe this is the bullet that's supposed to pass through JFK's neck and then into Connolly twice. So it's supposed to go through bones, and it comes out rather pristine. They talk about Connolly's wound, his wrist wound, was not created by a pristine bullet. I guess their definition of pristine is like bullet casing right before it had even been shot. Perfect, there's no dents, nothing, like it has to be fully controlled, checked, everything, it looks perfect. So I guess maybe in that mind it does say that this one was that bullet, but that one always kind of threw me off as well. I'm just like, it doesn't look like it traveled. And I'm not saying the line, because I do believe if you look at how Connolly was sitting, he's not directly in front of JFK. He's a little to the left, and I think 6 inches lower. Just based on the jump seats. Later in the report, it does talk about how witnesses, I think, heard anywhere between 3 and 6 gunshots. Now, there's a whole bunch of different explanations, maybe echoing, sound bouncing off of buildings. And I don't know if I totally buy into that, though, not to play devil's advocate, but I know some people did hear 3 gunshots at Billy the Kid's death by the hands of Pat Garrett, and one of them was a ricochet. So maybe at least one of those sounds that somebody heard, if they heard 6, was a ricochet, because we know at least one did miss the motorcade itself. And kind of transparently, the commission does actually talk about how the press circulated 3 cartridges were found in the school book depository. This is, as some people call it, the sniper's nest. But it does say in the report that this could have subconsciously colored witnesses' minds to hearing 3 gunshots. So, kind of weirdly transparent in here that maybe some of the people writing it thought that the 3 gunshot witnesses could have just been remembering that there's 3 cartridges found. Talking about kind of the shots as well, witnesses claim interval of shots were not evenly spaced. So it wasn't like bam, bam, bam. It was like ba-bam, bam, or bam, ba-bam. And so either the first and seconds were bunched or the second thirds were bunched. It's kind of just dependent on some of the witnesses. Obviously, again, then some of the witnesses have different kind of ideas of how many gunshots there were, and again, perhaps where the gunshots came from. And then there's a large portion just kind of dedicated to which shot missed, Was it the first shot? Was it the second shot? Or was it the third shot? It seems like the report kind of leans towards, I guess, the third one, which at least one section of the report was like, this would make the most sense because the target's further away, they've turned, and they've sped up. So obviously that's going to bring us to the elephant in the room, the conclusions. And the conclusion for this one by the Warren Commission, obviously, as everyone knows, was that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in killing President John F. Kennedy. There's evidence that they use. Obviously, the rifle he owned was under the alias of A. Heidel. When he was caught in the Texas theater, he did have a card on there that said A. Heidel. And when he was handing out pamphlets, this is purportedly who he had worked for on the pamphlet, which the commission goes about saying there was no Heidel, and it was just kind of a play on the name Fidel, obviously for Cuba, which again, it's what pamphlets he was handing out. He took his wedding ring off, which you think if he took his wedding ring off, he didn't think he was coming back. Of course, there's the other side of the story that the two weren't really getting along. At the same time, that does seem kind of damning as far as Oswald's role in this. There's also his prior attempt on General Walker. It was failed. Again, if somebody can try once, they can try again. The conclusion also is that, obviously he's not killed by a conspiracy, and that Jack Ruby was also not part of this conspiracy and just kind of attacked him out of a fit of rage. As he said, he felt bad and didn't want to put Mrs. Kennedy through that. So this one is, I guess, kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. It does have a lot of information, but I think perhaps like An Authentic Life of Billy the Kid by Pat Garrett, maybe it's better as an early building block. Obviously, there's a ton of good information regarding, I guess, Kennedy's movements. We've learned a lot more since, and a lot of good information, I guess, on Oswald. So, as far as that, I do think at least it's a good building block to start research at, much like An Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. Now, previously we have done The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop, and I do think I recommend that book more, which is weird because this is the official one. And while The Day Kennedy Was Shot obviously goes along with the official story, like if you're expecting someone else to have killed JFK, that's not the book for you. But I do think that one's just a little bit more easy to read, a little bit more palatable, shall we say, just for everybody. This one, at points, it seemed like, because it's an official paper, it repeats stuff a lot, and I caught myself a couple times, like, did I already read this? Like, did I fall back accidentally, Did I write down the wrong page and now I have to go ahead? And so, yeah, I think overall, probably a 7 out of 10 I would rate this. And that's more for, A, the historical perspective, as well as, B, there's a lot of good information to at least start building research off of. Obviously, since this has come out, there's been other investigations. There's been more information that's come out from the Secret Service people that have been there, from other reporters, from witnesses, and so we've learned a lot more since this was put out. And of course, I think the final thing for people is, what side of the story do you believe? I think as of recent, a good chunk of America, and I think it was like 60% or something like that, based on a recent survey, doesn't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Which obviously this report states he acted alone. And so I think a lot of people, if they read this, wouldn't buy it fully, because obviously if 60% of people don't buy this story that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, they're not going to buy the conclusion. So yeah, I think, I don't know, it definitely was an interesting read for me. I can't say I really took anything extra away. There's definitely some more details that I read. But again, I think if you look back at, The Day Kennedy Was Shot, they were probably in there, and just because we read so much and do so much research, it kind of got out of my mind. But yeah, I think 7 out of 10. I didn't want to get too much on the conspiratorial side for this one. Definitely just wanted to focus more on the Warren Report. I think if you watch our videos, you definitely know how I feel about these subjects. I think it's worth a read. I know I've seen reviews that say it's just complete fantasy, and I don't think that's totally fair. Again, kind of going back to the authentic life of Billy the Kid, there's a lot in the beginning of that book that's complete fiction, and people have just built off that. Obviously, once you get Pat Garrett's side, it's a little bit more truthful. But to say this is more fantastical than that one, I think is kind of unfair. But did it reach the right conclusion? I won't say in this one. But for now, yeah, go check it out. It's definitely going to be more of a report. It's not a novel or anything. It's going to be dry, but it's not super dry. I've actually read like that Cracking the Brushy Bill, hoax of Billy the Kid, where that one felt more textbooky actually than this one. This one wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, though, like I said, it is kind of a slow read if you have this version, because you're reading 2 pages per page, so it feels like you're going slower. But in reality, you're really not. But if you want to see some other JFK stuff, we have actually done JFK A Nightmare on Elm Street. Check that link above. It's an earlier attempt at kind of retelling, I guess, the official story, and we kind of go into some of the conspiratorial side. And then we check out the memorials in Dallas and Fort Worth. So if you want to check that out, that link was above. Make sure to go watch that. Thank you guys for checking this one out. But until next time, if you want to see more Cool's book reviews, click that link to your left. For more about us here at Cool's Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, do you trust the Warren Report?